Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I'm here to do my February wrap up. I have my books here, and we're going to talk through them. I have Foster, I have flowers. What a lovely video. So I'm going to start with a couple of DNFs. Let me just dig through my pile. I've just gathered them all here. So I had 2 DNFs this month, which is kind of higher than what I'd usually have. So the first of those was Mayflies by Andrea Hagen. I really thought I was going to like this book, and I love the cover so much, and I'm really sad I didn't get on with it at all. I read at least half of it, so I kind of read through all of it when they were younger, and I thought maybe when the book kind of turns to when they're older I'll have more interest. And having read like a couple of chapters in of when they were older and still just being really meh about it, I was like, I haven't enjoyed it so far, and I've read probably 3/4 of the book. I think it's time to put it down. So unfortunately I didn't like Mayflies. Whenever I DNF a book it gets 1 star. That's what 1 star means for me, is I didn't like it to the point where I didn't finish it. And then the next book I DNF'd was I think it's An Empty Planet or The Empty Planet by Daniel Bricker and John Ibbotson. I didn't read that much of this one, to be fair. I kind of started it and it really just wasn't pulling me in. I started it in January and I'd had it on my bedside table. I kept picking it up and reading tiny pieces of it, and there was just not as much interest there in practice as maybe there was in theory. And I don't see the point in reading non-fiction books that I'm not interested in when I'm reading them. Like, if I had a purpose to read it, I would, but there's no point if it's just for fun. So those are my 2 DNFs. Then I read one other non-fiction, which was Dying to be Ill, True Stories of Medical Deception. This book is about Munchausen's disorder and Munchausen's by proxy. It's by Mark D. Feldman, who's like one of the leading researchers in Munchausen's, and it was just talking through like patient stories and stories of psychiatrists in relation to Munchausen's. I like the book, I like the content, but I actually don't think it was as well written as I would have hoped. This one is intended to be directed more towards the general public, whereas the other book I've read by him, which is called Patient or Pretender, is more of like a text for psychiatrists. I just didn't think it hit the mark as directed towards the average reader that well, but I thought it was good nonetheless. Then on to fiction. So I definitely read more fiction than non-fiction. In February, I finally finished The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, which was supposed to be my Christmas read, and then I can't remember what took over it at Christmas. Hi Fuzz. Something else took over at Christmas and I didn't end up getting through this one. But when I started reading it, I did actually really like it. So essentially it's about a world where overpopulation in cities has led to kind of urban populations being very hard to live in. And we follow a group of people who've decided to take part in an experiment for them to live in the wilderness, which is essentially like a group of interconnected national parks. And we follow like their little tribe over quite a long period of time. I won't tell you much more than that, but I did really like it. Lots of writing about nature, and it's very plotty and very fast. So despite it being a bit of a chunky one, it is relatively quick to get through, and I liked it a lot. Then I spoke about my experience with Luster a little bit in my reading vlog from the other weekend. I thought it was fine, I just didn't love it as much as some other people seem to have loved it, and it reminded me of an awful lot else I've read. It's a book about a young woman who is in an affair with a married man, and the relationship between her and this married man. I enjoyed it. I just think I'm one of those groups of people that just felt like it was fine. Then next, the one everyone's been talking about is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. I really like this book, and I really want for her to write more in future. So in essence, it's such a like cool little queer story. In essence, it's around a individual who was a cis man, then transitioned to become a trans woman, then detransitioned. But there's kind of questions about whether or not they are now a cis man again because they've detransitioned, or whether they're always a trans woman. But there's someone that's had a transition in their gendered past. So this individual is like essentially presenting themselves to the world as if they never were a trans woman, but they have lots of friends who still are trans women. And they find themselves in a relationship with someone that they work with, and they manage to get the woman pregnant. And the book follows the queer family dynamics between this person who is now presenting as a man, the totally like straight cis white woman who has no context into any of this, and the tribe of people that surround the main person in this saga, whether you kind of agree with them that they're presenting as male now, or whether you agree with their mates that regardless of how they're choosing to come now, they still are not a cis man. And it's complicated and lovely and messy, and I loved that it was like that, and it was really good. I really want to read more. I've hardly read anything by trans authors and things that are like trans stories by trans authors, so really enjoyed it, and if you haven't read it yet, it is a genuinely really fun read. Then I read Verge by Lydia Yukanovic, and this was a book of short stories. I didn't get on with this one as much as I hoped I would. Whilst the stories were like dark and in my general like wheelhouse of stuff I liked, a lot of them just felt like she was writing so far out of her own experience that it really grated against me, and I generally thought a lot of the stories were quite forgettable. In fact, I don't know if I could remember the plot of any bar like one or two. So I probably wouldn't recommend this one. Sorry, Tom, I know you got me this one. It just didn't stick. There wasn't enough in the short stories that grasped me, and for short story collections, I need to have at least one or two that are really good and I kind of stick in my head for me to really enjoy them. So unfortunately that one wasn't for me. Oh, I have one more non-fiction. I tell a lie. I listened to The Diary of a Bookseller. You saw that in my vlog as well. It's a very repetitive little book, but it was quite comforting. I liked it as an audiobook. It kind of followed me around for a few days. It is literally, as it says, a diary. It's dated entries from a man who owns an antiquarian bookshop, and he just explores what his life is like, what his interactions with customers are like over the course of a year. That's all it is. I thought it was nice to have a little accompanying party in this book, but yeah, it was not anything special, not anything brilliant. Being a bit weird because I'm sitting right now facing our outside window and a neighbour is looking at me as I'm talking because it looks like I'm talking at them out the window. I'm looking at you. Okay, so the final book that I read was Tender is the Flesh by Augusta Barazia. I think that's probably how you say it. And I read this one really fast. I read it on the evening of my birthday and the day after in the sunshine in that lovely little bit at the end of February we had. This book is disgusting, so I don't often read bits of my books out to Tom, really, but I kept having to read like little bits of it. It's so grotesque. It's like a book equivalent of Saw. If you don't know what this book is about, the kind of premise behind it is that there's a society in which meat, as in all animal meat, has become contaminated by a virus, and in order to stave off the demand for meat and the supposed health implications of being a vegetarian, they turn to the production of human meat. And I won't say much more than that, but it is very, very gross. So those were all the books that I read in February. So 7 books I finished, 9 books I'd started and read some of. Isn't too bad, but it was less than I read in January. I've had the first week of March off, so I'm kickstarting my reading a little bit, though I'm going with audiobooks, which for me is slower than reading physical books, so it's not going to be an enormous quantity of stuff, but I'm really enjoying it and enjoying having some time to relax. For those of you that watched my last video, I managed to finish my dissertation piece early this week, way ahead of what I thought I was going to do. So that's out of the way. I've now just got 1 exam and 2 short pieces to write that are like 500 words each, and I'm done with my qualification. So I'm really, really happy with that, and I can't wait. I'm so excited to have all my weekends and all my weeks of annual leave back to read and film. It's been a year and a half now since I started this qualification, and because it's a master's, it's just a bit of a higher level and takes a bit more of my time than the other study I've done, like during BookTube. And yeah, I'm definitely going to have at least a year off before I do any additional external from work study to just really enjoy the spare time. So that was my February wrap up. I will talk to you guys again soon. I don't know whether I'm going to film another video this week and then save it, or whether I'll just do it as it comes. I'm trying to be really gentle and just film whenever I feel like it and chat to you guys whenever the urge comes up, rather than setting it to any schedule. But I'm sure I'll see you soon, and look after yourselves until then. Bye!